Back in 490 BCE, on this little seaside plain, one of the most important battles in history went down. This was a true David versus Goliath story. You have a small, completely outnumbered army standing against the juggernaut that was the Persian Empire. This is the story of the Battle of Marathon, and it's a conflict that didn't just decide the fate of a single city. You could argue it shaped the entire course of Western civilization. So how did one battle carry so much weight? Let's dive in.
We're going to break this incredible story down into 5 parts. First, we'll look at the spark that lit the whole fire, a king's personal mission for revenge. Then, we'll see the massive Persian force as it lands on Greek shores, staring down the hopelessly outnumbered defenders. After that, we'll get into the brilliant, super risky strategy of the Greek general. Then, witness the actual clash on the plain. And finally, we'll unpack the unbelievable, lasting legacy of Marathon.
All right, so how did we even get here? Well, our story really starts with the Persian Achaemenid Empire. At this point, we're talking about the biggest empire the world had ever seen. It stretched all the way from India to southeastern Europe, and it was hungry for more, ruled by the very ambitious King Darius I.
This line is the key to this whole thing. The historian Herodotus tells us that King Darius was so furious with the Athenians that he actually had a servant repeat these exact words to him 3 times every single night before dinner. But why? What could this one little city-state have possibly done to get the personal, focused rage of the most powerful man on the planet?
Well, it all kicked off with something called the Ionian Revolt. You see, Greek cities over in modern-day Turkey, which were under Persian control, decided to rebel. Athens, along with another city, Eretria, sent ships and soldiers to help them out. And together, they marched inland and burned Sardis, a major Persian regional capital. To Darius, this wasn't just a rebellion, it was a personal insult, a direct attack on his authority, and he swore he would punish Athens and Eretria and make an example out of them.
After putting down the revolt, Darius made good on his threat. In 490 BCE, he sent a huge naval force across the Aegean Sea, led by his top commanders, Datis and Artaphernes. After sacking Eretria, they set their sights on Athens, landing at the Bay of Marathon, this wide, flat plain only about 26 miles from the city itself. The invasion was on.
So let's just try to wrap our heads around the size of this invasion force. Modern historians, looking at the ancient sources, figure the Persians had about 25,000 infantry. And this wasn't just one type of soldier, it was a massive, multi-ethnic army pulled from all corners of the empire, mostly made up of archers and other lightly armed troops.
And they brought cavalry. About 1,000 horsemen. Now this was the Persians' ace in the hole. On a flat, open field like Marathon, cavalry against infantry that has no cavalry of its own, that's not just an advantage, that's usually a game-ender.
And who was waiting to meet this massive force? The entire citizen army of Athens, maybe 9,000 or 10,000 men, plus about 1,000 soldiers from the little city of Plataea. So all told, you're looking at maybe 11,000 Greek hoplites. They were outnumbered more than 2 to 1, and they had absolutely no answer for that Persian cavalry. The odds were just awful.
Now, of course, the Athenians had sent for help. They sent their best runner, a guy named Phidippides, who ran an insane 140 miles in 2 days to get to Sparta, the biggest military power in Greece. The Spartans promised they'd come, but there was a catch. They were in the middle of a sacred religious festival, the Carnea, and during that time, warfare was strictly forbidden. They said they couldn't march until the next full moon. The Athenians were completely on their own.
What we have here are 2 totally different philosophies of war. The Greek hoplite was basically a walking tank, covered in bronze armor, built for up-close, brutal, hand-to-hand combat. They fought shoulder to shoulder in this tight block called a phalanx, a literal wall of shields and spears. The average Persian soldier, on the other hand, was all about ranged attacks. They were lightly armored and used their bows to rain arrows down on the enemy from a distance before sending in the cavalry to clean up.
So for 5 long days, the 2 armies just stared at each other. It was a tense standoff. The Persians didn't want to attack the Greeks in their strong defensive position, and the Greeks sure didn't want to go out onto that open plain and get torn apart by the Persian cavalry. The man who had to break this deadlock was the Athenian general Miltiades. Now, what's really important here is that Miltiades had actually served with the Persians before. He knew their playbook, he knew their strengths, and he knew their weaknesses.
The heart of Miltiades' army was the phalanx, I want you to picture a moving fortress of men, right? Each guy is protected by his own huge shield and the shield of the guy next to him. For an enemy with light armor and short swords, running into a phalanx was like running headfirst into a wall of spear points. This was the Greeks' one huge tactical advantage.
So that brings us to the big question. Why attack at all? I mean, every day they waited, the Spartans got a day closer. Attacking seemed like a suicide mission. But then, on the 5th day, an opportunity popped up. The ancient sources aren't crystal clear on the details, but the most popular theory is that the Athenians got word that the dreaded Persian cavalry was temporarily gone, maybe being loaded back onto the ships for a sneak attack by sea on the city of Athens itself.
Miltiades knew this was it. This was his one shot. And he came up with this incredibly bold, high-risk plan. First, he would intentionally make his center weak, just a few ranks of men deep. Super dangerous. But he'd take all those extra men and stack them on his flanks, or wings. The idea was to let his weak center bend and fall back on purpose, baiting the best Persian soldiers to charge forward into a trap. Then, once they were drawn in, his super strong flanks would crush the weaker Persian wings and then turn inwards, completely surrounding the Persian center. It was an all-or-nothing gamble.
So, the cavalry's gone, the plan is set, Miltiades gives the order. Across a mile of open ground, 11,000 Greeks start advancing toward the Persian line. This was the moment that was going to change everything.
Herodotus tells us the Persians were just floored. They're watching this small army with no archers and no cavalry support just break into a full-on sprint towards them. They thought it was fatal madness. But it was a calculated risk. The Greeks were running to get through the kill zone, the effective range of all those Persian archers, as fast as possible. They needed to close the distance and make it a hand-to-hand fight, where their heavy armor and long spears gave them the edge.
The two lines smashed into each other with incredible force. And just as Miltiades had planned, his weak center started to give way under the pressure from the elite Persian and Sake troops. The Greeks fought like crazy, but they were slowly pushed back, luring the Persian center deeper and deeper into the trap.
And then came the knockout blow. While the Persian center was pushing forward, those heavily reinforced Greek flanks just steamrolled the weaker troops on the Persian wings. But they didn't chase after them. Instead, they pulled off this really difficult battlefield maneuver and wheeled inward, slamming into the exposed sides of the Persian center. The trap had sprung. The best troops of the Persian army were now surrounded on 3 sides. Panic took over, and the whole Persian line just collapsed.
What followed was a total rout. The Greeks chased the panicked Persians all the way back to their ships, cutting them down as they tried to flee. A lot of Persians didn't know the area and ran straight into the nearby marshes and drowned. According to Herodotus, 6,400 Persian bodies were counted on the battlefield. The Athenians and their allies from Plataea, they lost just 192 men. The numbers are just unbelievable. It was one of the most lopsided victories in military history.
But hey, the victory wasn't totally sealed just yet. The battle on the plain was won, sure, but the fight for Athens itself was still hanging in the balance. The Persian fleet was still out there, and it was still a major threat.
Miltiades realized what the Persians were going to do: sail around the coast and try to take the city of Athens, which was totally undefended. So in this incredible feat of endurance, the exhausted Athenian army, still wearing all their heavy armor, force-marched the 26 miles all the way back home. And they got there just in time to see the Persian ships appearing on the horizon. When the Persian commanders saw the city was defended by the very same army they thought they'd left behind miles away, they knew the game was up. They just turned their ships around and sailed for home.
So, why are we still talking about a battle from 2,500 years ago? Well, its impact was just monumental. For the first time, it proved that the mighty Persian Empire could be beaten, which sent this jolt of confidence across all of Greece. Most importantly, it saved the young Athenian democracy from being snuffed out before it ever really got going. That one act of survival allowed for the golden age of Athens to happen, the time that gave us Socrates, Plato, the foundations of Western philosophy, drama, the Parthenon, the list goes on. And of course, that legendary march from the battlefield back to the city is what inspired the modern marathon race, a symbol of endurance that honors this incredible day.
You know, to really understand what marathon meant to the people who were there, just look at the great playwright Aeschylus. He was one of the fathers of Greek tragedy, a literary giant. But he also fought at Marathon as a regular soldier. Years later, when he wrote his own epitaph, he didn't mention any of his famous plays. He only wanted to be remembered for one thing, that he fought at Marathon. He defined his whole life not by the amazing art he created, but by the simple fact that on that day, he stood in the line and fought for the freedom of his home.
It's just a powerful reminder that history isn't just about kings and generals. It's made by ordinary people who find the courage to do something absolutely extraordinary.